Get the candidates up to the dais, please, first. And can you members of the public come up a bit? Let's come a little closer. It's all right. Come closer. We want to hug everybody. You know, feel the love. You know, I know you're in different camps. And that's how the game is, but that's okay. Okay, we have some cameras here, and this is going to be posted on YouTube, and you're going to get the link provided to, I guess, most of the camps, and people who want the link later. They will be provided the link by Mr. Weinberg. He is the Vice President of one of the block associations. Anyway, on behalf of the Coalition of Block Associations, 130th, 131st, 132nd, let me thank you for coming and give yourself a round of applause. So this candidate forum, I am told, may be replicated after the primary. So look out, I guess, for some information on whether it be on email. How are we doing these days? We're not beating drums anymore. So I guess we're going to call each other on the phone, and you know how we get the information going. But after the primary, there is the plan to hold another candidate forum. So just giving you guys a heads up on that. We don't just stop here. Community involvement and trying to educate the people is an everyday thing. It doesn't stop with elections and doesn't end when elections and then people vote and whatnot. So I just be mindful that the people who are putting this together is not seeing this as a one-time thing, a one-shot deal. And with that in mind, let me segue straight into the people who put this together. Some of the people are here. They are various vice presidents and presidents and active members on the different blocks. And I would like you all to stand up and be acknowledged and be recognized. Please. And with that in mind, let me also bring up to say a few words to you, the dynamic Miss Capri's house.
Hi, I just want to thank Vince Morgan and Councilwoman Inez Dickens for coming out and participating in this event with us today. And I want to thank you all for being on time. Thank you. All right, so let's get this show on the road. Let me tell you what the rules are. There aren't many rules, because sometimes we get inundated with rules and we make ourselves fools. So it's better we have very many rules. I just asked that the candidates exhibit. Hi, Ms. Dickens. Sorry. I just would like the candidates to be civil, cordial, exhibit some decorum and stuff, and the supporters, because usually the candidates are nice to each other, but the supporters get kind of antsy. So hopefully we could have a lovely little evening, and we can get some of the ideas, and we can raise some of the issues and whatnot. And you know, some of you could leave here and make a very informed choice when you go to the polling. All right, let me tell you who I am first of all, and then I'll get straight into the questions. My name is Rod Hillman Hackshaw. I am a university lecturer. I teach politics. I am also a journalist. I write WWR8NY, Room 8 New York Politics. That's the blog site I've been writing on for the last 7-8 years. I also write in the Daily Gotham. I occasionally guest write on some of the local and even city newspapers. Upon that, I'm an activist. I ran for office a few times. I've worked for elected officials. Politics has been in my blood because my father was an activist way back in Trinidad where I was born. So with that in mind, I am glad to be here. I've been involved in Harlem. We once had a chess academy we opened up in here many years ago to teach the kids how to play chess.
and it's not around anymore, but I still get very much involved in what's going on in Harlem, and Harlem is just such a wonderful place. So I'm glad to be here, and thanks for having me. So let's start with the first question, and where I come from, Vince ladies first. So I'm sorry, but I gotta ask Ms. Inez. Let's get straight to what's been troubling Inez lately, I think. Phantom sanitation tickets. The sanitation department has a habit of writing tickets that aren't really honest, true, and many times they have been observed, let's say, fudging. If you were to be re-elected, do you have any initiative in mind as to how we can go about not making them only honest and raising the level of integrity of some of these sanitation officials, but how can we improve that system where all over the city, homeowners have been really complaining about all these tickets of the sanitation, the environmental people, and a lot of these tickets are phony. Do you have any initiative in mind that you want to introduce or what?
Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you, the Friendship Baptist Church, and to the free block associations for holding this. The phantom tickets that you're referring to, they're free. That is what occurs, and the homeowners that we hit with them from dog feces unfairly, because what's not being ticketed are those people who are walking their dogs and not picking up behind themselves. The administration policy has to be changed for enforcement. There's going to be a new administration come January of 2014. From my district, and because I intend to be Speaker of the City of New York, and also I will work hard with the administration, with the new mayor, with the new commissioners, because there will be a new commissioner at the Department of Sanitation. I will work hard to change policy so that enforcement is done correctly, and certain proof that they are not accepting now, such as cameras. They're not accepting the proof. Some buildings, many buildings have cameras, and they're not accepting that as proof of the work of cleaning the sidewalks that the homeowner is doing and being unfairly ticketed. So it's about policy that I am committed to change. I'm fighting with DOS right now on behalf of homeowners because I am a homeowner. So I understand the unfair ticketing that goes on.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
That's a great long way on. Red light.
That's a great question. I want to extend it out beyond just the unfair tickets that a lot of homeowners are getting. Let's talk about in the morning when you wake up and it seems like our neighborhood is inundated with traffic enforcement that seem to just prey in communities where working people are. Let's talk about the small business community that also has a problem and has been complaining about over-ticketing when it comes to these fines that small businesses have, in particular restaurants and in particular some of the places where you buy food, where you have precisely, and a lot of business owners describe this to me, precisely 1 minute before someone litters in front of your place to clean it up, because if a worker is there for the city and sees that, they're going to ticket you. And all of that spells up a city that is basically trying to raise revenue because they have a quota system and they're trying to raise revenue by doing all of these tickets. So the enforcement has to start in my office. So when I'm elected, I'm going to have a point person in my office that actually facilitates combining these types of claims of harassment, basically, and this over-ticketing, so that they can bundle these things together and make sure that we have somebody who responds in the office to these issues and making sure that we actually stop them.
I'm not hearing no specific legislation.
Well, the specific legislation is that there are laws that allow for the ticketing of these things. The problem is the over-enforcement of them and the oversight of the quotas that have been established for these different departments.
So what would you do if you found a sanitation or a DP official actually fudging? What do you do?
The fudging comes from the fact that they have to respond to a quota for a certain number of tickets for violations. You need to make the system fair. You can't eliminate the tickets because there's a reason for tickets. However, you need to make sure that the people who work for the system issuing the tickets are under so much pressure to fulfill a quota that they actually feel compelled to write more tickets than they have to.
And while we're on that, there are newspapers covering this event, so I know Ms. Dickens has been in the news a lot. Anything you want to say publicly to the newspapers about some of the issues you've been dealing with lately? Or?
Well, the issues that were brought forth, and I'll say them directly, and many of my residents are right here in the audience today because they feel that the paper, the Post, which is the newspaper that depicted our president as a monkey and had a caricature of him as a monkey, was utilized by opponents that do not want a black woman from Harlem to be speaker. And I don't do daily operations, but I'm not going to walk away from the fact that my family owns the building. Now, as far as the taxes, yes, she did get behind in the taxes. She signed an agreement that is allowable, an in-rem agreement that is allowable under law, and as many of us have had to do because of the high real estate taxes. And although the city says they're not raising the rate, which they do not, what happens is their assessment gets raised, and therefore our taxes go up. And all of us that are homeowners know that. And in addition,
well, let me talk for renters. Let me talk for renters. Right? Let me talk for renters because you happen to be a homeowner, right?
But there are many homeowners here, and that is the question.
I understand that. I understand that you happen to be a homeowner too. Fine, I understand that. Every year, the rent board seems to increase rents. Why?
The rents are increased by a board that is set up by the mayor as well as some other appointments that were done, not by the city council. And they have hearings, public hearings, and arguments. And frequently the rate is reduced because sometimes they'll talk about, the industry will talk about raising the rents maybe 7 or 8% for a one-year lease. And with the public hearings, that rate is reduced to sometimes 4%, 5% for 1 or 2 year lease. So that's how it's done. It's done after public hearings are done.
But there doesn't seem to be, coming out of the city council, any fighter for the renters.
Wait, I just want to answer. The rents are not set by the New York City Council.
I understand that.
They're set by the state.
We understand that.
Well, there are two issues, and everybody knows this. I mean, the slogan was made famous a couple of years ago, the rent is too darn high. And it's too high for everybody. And what seems to be happening in Manhattan, in particular in Brooklyn and some areas of Queens, there are these pressures to actually raise rents, and landlords are succumbing to trying to extricate people who lived here for a long time by raising their rents, and they just can't keep up with it. So the big problem is that we need to raise incomes in this community. We have too many people in this community that are underemployed or unemployed, so they just by de facto can't keep up with the rents as they skyrocket. On the other extreme, we need to identify every piece of affordable housing that we have here, where it comes to rent-stabilized units, where it comes to Mitchell-Lama properties, these TIL properties, Section 8 units that are available, and put them all in a master list so we protect the affordable housing that we have, and we know what we're dealing with. I do not understand why, and I will commit to you today that one of the first things I will do is I will start putting that list together. I will use my resources in the city council to make sure we take stock of the affordable housing that we have, and yes, we can do it. We can go knock door to door and find out who's living where, who's in that unit, so we can protect the affordable housing we have, and then, well, if we're taking stock of the affordable housing that we have, it's the units and the prices that they are and the people that live in those houses, man. And then we can devise a plan of action to make sure as we develop new properties that we have properties that are affordable, that are based on a rate that people that live in this community can keep up with. The problem is escalating rent costs, but not escalating incomes in this community.
Well, here's a suggestion, Mr. Morgan. Here's a suggestion. And this,
The affordability.
let me get this question. I'll give you first crack to answer. In 1998, I ran to the Assembly and I proposed that we put in the tax code a renter's rebate, whereby if you pay a certain percentage of your income in rent, once you go above that, when tax time comes, you get some money coming back from the state. Because a recent survey in Brooklyn, I'm really from Brooklyn, so excuse me. A recent survey said at least half of the working people, regular folks, the John Legend folks, the ordinary people, they are paying more than half of their incomes in rent. So, would you sign on to something like that, going to Albany Home Rule and being encoded in the tax code that once you pay a certain percentage, and we can work it out for people, what that percentage is in rent, would you sign on to that, something like that?
I don't know if I would have to really read the full legislation, because right now, what needs to happen is home rule, and the city council sends a home rule message every year about the rents, and it has not been done. The state has not relinquished control of the rents to the city of New York. The rents are set by the state. Now, what the affordability that I'm talking about is the affordability based upon the area, not the HUD AMI, area median income, but the actual area in which we live. That is not what has been done in the past. It's only been done, I did it at the Bolton, and I'm doing it on Park Avenue, but that has not been done massively across the city.
But we're jumping over a very big part of this, and a very big part of this is making sure that the landlords in this city understand that they are going to have to deal with legislation that's done. They're going to have to deal with making sure that as they develop properties, as they own properties, as they renovate properties, they're going to have to be friendly to the local population. And frankly, they're going to have somebody sitting across from them that has some credibility and has a sense of what the community is. And frankly, we have to bring the trust back to our city council office so that we have someone credible representing us when they're sitting across from those predatory landlords who are here that it behooves them to raise the rates. It behooves them to actually try and get people out of rent stabilized units. It behooves them to try and find loopholes to the legislation that you actually pass, whether it be at the state level or whether it be at the city level. We need credibility, we need somebody who has trust in this community, and we need somebody who's going to be able to stand steadfast and strong against these landlords, most of which don't live in this community, and make sure that they actually play ball and they understand that they've got to respect the residents that live in their buildings and the residents in
But would you sign on to that piece of legislation if it came your way in the city council?
I think it's a good start for an idea. I think that there has to be a lot more fleshing out of the actual details, because the thing I fear is that the people who need it most won't be impacted from it if you just do an across the board rebate to everybody. We need to set income caps. We need to set length of time in the community. We need to establish some type of protections for the people that live here. But again, most importantly, we have to start worrying about the people who are most vulnerable and who are being left behind, that are underemployed or unemployed, who don't even make it to the application process.
Well, with that, let me segue into what happened yesterday. Some workers from McDonald's, and they said, come on, this minimum wage thing that you're offering out there, can't have it. And the McDonald's people came back and said, well, here's a list of how you can budget your money. They have $400 for rent. I was wondering about where in New York you find that. Do you support these workers, Ms. Dickens?
I have been on the line walking with them.
So you want the minimum wage to raise?
Yes, I've already been on the line with them, walking for the one on 125th Street. I went and helped them in the one in the Bronx. I met with them, and I've been working with the union and with the workers. So some of them may be here today that can show you that I have been out there already on the line. Not rhetoric, but actually walking the line. And I just want to get
so
that
can you tell us what have you done in the council? What types of initiatives you undertook, and what kind of legislations or resolutions you introduced relative to this issue?
So we passed at the city council. We passed the paid sick leave. We did raise the minimum wage, although not sufficiently. We we have enacted legislation for the protection of those who want to join a union but are being targeted against and harassed not to join a union. Because that's part of what the problem is when people want to join a union, they're being harassed not to join a union. And we've enacted legislation for their protection in order to try to protect them. But I want to get back to about the affordable housing, if you don't mind.
I'll give you 1 minute, one quick minute.
And that's because that I have had the ability, because I'm able to negotiate, because I do understand how to massage the numbers, not to kill the development, because development brings jobs, it raises the economic base. The problem that has occurred in the past is that when you bring development in the past, it wasn't protected, that the indigenous population that stayed here to create an atmosphere that opens the floodgates for everyone to come into Harlem, to welcome everyone. We have not been allowed to stay here. I've been blessed with the ability to negotiate with the developers so that I've increased the affordable units and decreased the AMIs, and in fact negotiated to get, when there was commercial space available, retail space, that the small CBOs, the small community-based organizations got free space in retail.
Where she actually stood against the living wage bill. And there's a difference between the minimum wage bill and the living wage bill. Until the very end, until it was politically expedient,
I want to clarify a statement of lies that the gentleman is offering. And that's because what I did was I worked with 32BJ. I worked with the advocates in order to tell them, you have to talk to our small, minority-owned MWBEs to find out what they can do in order to keep, because they're the ones that's hiring in our community. And not just, and as a result of that, I've got their endorsement from the advocates and from 32BJ, because they said to me, we had no idea, we never talked to anybody, and no council member had raised into minority communities and talking to them until you did. And based on, I said, I will join with you. I gave them information.
Can we get some more help?
Them to get into the 5 boroughs. I reject that.
There are 2 candidates here, and we've got to be fair. Let's at least give the candidate a chance to respond. Thank you. Mr. Morgan, please, you got 2 minutes. You got 2 minutes.
There is currently a $6.5 billion project going on in West Harlem. It is a project that is going to transform Harlem forever. This project is got a contract that the state signed with the president of Columbia University in 2008. And that contract called for 35% participation by minority, women, and locally owned businesses. And it promised in a contract, not a promised handshake, a written contract, that 7,000 jobs are going to be created for this community. For the past 2.5 years, I've been standing up and asking the councilwoman to stand with me to make sure that Columbia University creates jobs and lives up to that commitment. And there have been so, sitting with developers, in fact, sitting with the same developers, the revenue developers, and the pack of big developers downtown, and getting their endorsement recently shows that sitting with the developers is not the place to be. We want to sit across from the developers and demand that those developers
Be specific. Tell us what do you think Ms. Dickens could have done that she didn't do? Tell us.
Many of these big projects, there are currently $55 billion worth of projects being built around this city. City-funded projects on city land with city resources. And there has not been a peep from this office about making sure that minorities, women, and locally owned businesses get a fairer stake in development dollars.
Okay, let's give her a chance to respond. Ms. Dickens?
All right, now, number one, the Columbia expansion is in Robert Jackson's district. That's number one. However, this is the same gentleman that stood up made accusations about the local development corp that was formed for the protection of the community, and I have newspaper articles where he was standing out on a platform about it. And then what happened is that the Attorney General, Eric Schneiderman, took the case up, and now he's had to send a letter of apology because it turns out all the things that was said by this candidate about what was going on over there was a lie. It turned out he didn't know what he was talking about, and he was denied, and he had to apologize. And it cost the state millions of dollars in an investigation.
Let's give him a chance to respond.
Erroneous lies that he told.
Mr. Morgan a chance to respond. Come on.
Actually,
That's very true. That's in the newspaper, and I got the letter.
Council,
I got the letter about you know.
Let's let the candidate respond. Let's let the candidate respond, please. Let's let the candidate respond, please. Let's let the candidate respond.
Councilwoman Dickens is right about one thing. My efforts did result in Attorney General Harris.
Why don't the organizers of this whatever shape you know, about the issues that the community is concerned about?
We need to let the candidates respond. We're going to move off of this topic. We have a list of topics we're going to get to. We're going to let the candidates respond.
You haven't done anything, and you have nothing positive.
If the supporters show a little more restraint, we can get the candidates to respond. You know, Mr. Morgan has the floor. Mr. Morgan has the floor.
Please, everyone, please, just the candidates up here, let us get through our statements, and I give you the respect to give me your time. Please give me the respect to give me my time. And your sister is standing up making...
Yeah, but she was in order to it. So she was on the way.
Let's move on, please.
I apologize to everybody in the audience because this is really, really not respectful to you. And I hope that everyone, and I know you're all here to hear the issues, to hear the facts, and hear solutions to the problems that we have in this community. And we need to move forward.
Can we let the candidate respond, please? We're moving off this issue right now. Yes, sir.
My efforts with Columbia University were, in fact, they got Eric Schneiderman, the Attorney General, to look into the failures of an organization over 5 years. And because of my actions, a new board was formed and a new executive director was hired, and they finally started moving in the right direction. If I had not stood up, there would still be a quagmire at the West Harlem Development Corporation, and there would be no momentum going for the other thing. But guess what? I'm not finished. I haven't sat down. I'm going now to make sure that Columbia University lives up to their commitment to $2.2 billion worth of projects. You know what $2.2 billion does for this community? It actually does give more people hope. It does make us feel like if we have a vested stake in that, those 7,000 jobs, if we have a vested stake in that, it allows our children to grow up in a community where they see those glass buildings 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and say, I know somebody who built that.
Let's move to education. Thank you. Let's move to education. Starting again with Ms. Inez Dickens. What is your position on the co-location of charter schools in public school facilities, particularly the 40,000 homeless school children in New York City are enrolled in charter schools?
I'm against the co-location. I fought with Wadley in order to protect Wadley, and we were successful at it, at keeping Wadley from being expanded by a charter school. If people want the option, I have no problem with parents having the option if they choose charter schools. My problem is I support public schools. I put funding that I have per capita in public schools. And where a charter school has co-located, it has caused division in the public school because of the charter school having certain things available to their children, and then the public school children are being denied access to even their bathrooms. And that's unfair and it's wrong. I have nothing against charter charter schools.
So-
Nothing for those who want their children to go.
So-
I think parents should have that option.
Ladies and
However, I support
Ladies and
public
gentlemen,
schools.
I got some skin in the game. I have 2 small children, a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old. They're both enrolled in PS 180, which is a regular public school on Manhattan Avenue and 119th Street. So I see every day the ups and downs of the problems that we have with our public schools. We have 45 public schools. That's charter and regular public schools. Some of them co-located, some of them not. 6 high schools in this district. I think this district can be a model for education, an urban education. I think charter schools are an option, but co-locations create a natural problem when you have 2 entrances to the same building, 2 groups of kids that come from the same population, but 2 different economic futures, 2 different educational futures, depending on what interest you come in. We have to make sure that we prioritize each and every individual school. And I'm going to say this right now, we got 45 schools and 365 days a year. There's no reason why the city council person who has direct oversight of the Department of Education can't prioritize visiting every school in this district to talk to parents, teachers, and students at least once a year. And the councilwoman, and I love you dearly, but she hasn't even visited our school, PS 180, in 3 years.
Oh, I think.
So we need to make sure that we have an opportunity to get into every one of our public schools and talk to parents, teachers, and students to come up with a constructive plan on how to make a difference in that school. There's some blanket issues for schools as well, like the supply issue. We deal with that. At our school, our PTA spends more time raising money for basic supplies like paper, crayons, books for the library, than we do raising money for the extras. And I want to use some of my discretionary funds to kick off a campaign that we raise $1 million so that we can provide $25,000 a year to every school to solve the supply issue across the board. That's a constructive plan of action. It's not just saying that I support education. I stood up with Wadley, which was in danger of closing down. My question is, where were we at when Wadley was put on probation 3 years before
Now, I
to make sure we had a constructive plan to keep that?
I just want to respond.
Give Ms. Dickens a chance to respond, please.
I want to respond to 180. At PS 180, I went to 180, and I, in conjunction with the PAL Center, wrote a $1.5 million grant with help, our federal grant. And the president's wife, Michelle Obama, came to PS 180 in order to kick off the initiative that grant was funding. And so I was very proud of that. Now that's just the first thing. I also have a music program at PS 180 that I fund. Now as far as Wadley, my work at Wadley, I work with Wadley. I go there regularly. I speak to the youth there. I fund annually a book that the children write their poetry. I help them to get a national grant at Wadley in order for those same children to get additional assistance in that school at Wadley. So Wadley is no stranger to me.
I'm going to put both of you on the spot because we have media here. We have a young lady from the New York Post here. Kathleen, right? Is here. Kathleen, you here? Right? From New York. I want to put you guys on the spot. If there was a chance to get rid of charter schools entirely from this cross-meshing with the public school system and deal strictly with public schools and let charter schools go to private school route, would you be supportive of that or not, and why or why not?
Charter schools, some parents, a lot of parents want the options for charter schools. And they should have that option. And I also want to state, even though I don't support charter schools, even though I don't, it's not a private school, it's a public school actually. Charter schools are public schools.
But did you take funds from, draining funds from?
And that's what the problem is. It's draining the funds that should go to public school. That is exactly the problem. Because it is considered a public school, it is draining the resources that should be going to the public school. It is also going to the charter schools. Now parents want an option, and I have no problem. I have no problem with parents having an option. My problem is when the resources are drained from the public school and given to the charter schools, then that becomes a problem. And I do have a problem with that because I want the public school children, that the public schools accept all children.
So you will
They
always
don't
accommodate
pick
charter
and choose to take it back.
schools. So you will always, 1 minute, Mr. Morgan, you will always accommodate charter schools.
No, I didn't say accommodated because I made a suggestion to the state, because the state determines about the charter schools. I made a suggestion to, in fact, I wrote it, and said, why don't you open and purchase these Catholic schools that are closing up? Why don't you purchase some of the churches that may be closing up? Or why don't you entertain some of the churches to have a charter school house there and give them additional income by paying rent?
Let me answer you all.
We always have to go back to the history of charter schools. Charter schools were created because they were a response to failing schools in our community. The reality is we can make charter schools obsolete by making sure that all of the schools in our community are actually operating at a level where they're educating our kids. Every charter school is concentrated in Harlem and the Bronx. In Manhattan, Harlem has the majority, almost 90% of the charter schools, because they're concentrated here. This is an effort to actually, it's not diverting resources, it's actually creating an option for some, but we need to eliminate the need for that option by going into every public school and making sure that their schools are performing, that they have the resources they need for those regular public schools, and they do that. Now, charter schools exist, and there's a significant number of children in our community that go to them. You can't eliminate that option for them, but I would not like to see, we already got 32 actually charter schools in Harlem. I don't think we need any more.
But both of you guys are trying to have your pie into the two. Because you can't at the same time say that charter schools are drawing funds away from the public school system, and yet both of you are willing to accommodate the charter schools.
I'm trying to make sure that we have every child in
How is your answer different to hers? How is your answer different to hers?
It's not different. I am for creating an environment where charter schools become obsolete, because the underperforming schools we have in this community, those 45 schools, 14 of them are underperforming and they're actually in danger. We've got 16 of them that are co-located right now. You've got to create an environment where the charter schools, they're not necessary anymore, by making sure that you have public education that is speaking to and addressing the issues of the people.
I'll give you the last word in this, I may move on.
The charter schools should not be co-located in the public schools. They're taking up space. They're taking resources away from the public school and giving it to the charter schools. The charter schools, most of them are corporate charter schools with the ability to raise money. They raise money on their own. And so that's why I suggested, all right, parents should have an option. However, not an option in the public school. Let them purchase the Catholic schools that's closing up. They're on 114th Street. St. Thomas. By St. Thomas. Rice High School, that's closed up. By Rice High School. Go into the Catholic churches and the Catholic schools that are closing up. Buy them. I'm not saying that don't give them an option. That's the option. But one option is not co-locating in the public school, taking up space.
I'm against co-locations too, and I do think we need to find spaces for the charter schools that exist. I'm for a moratorium on new charter schools, but we got to get back to the issue. We keep on talking about the charter school this, the regular school this. We got to make sure that we get into every public school. Take that charter school out of there, and you still have a building with children in it that we're going to have to address.
Say no. Frequently, we allow the supportive housing to come into this community, and now what has happened is become an overabundance.
But do you think it should be equal all 5 hours?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely, and the issue, as she just said, is that certain communities were louder, but beyond that, certain elected officials were silent when it comes to the overabundance and burden that's placed on local communities. Supportive housing is under attack, though, because of state funding cutbacks. Supportive housing is being eliminated across the board, and as this district changes and as development happens, a lot of these spaces that affordable housing is in, supportive housing is in, are actually in danger of losing their status and being developed for something else. So you've got to, at one level, protect the supportive housing for the people that really need it, but put the the emphasis on the transitional part. Where is the job plan? Where is the transition plan to make sure that transitional housing becomes permanent housing, permanent affordable housing, that is quality housing, that doesn't have building code violations, that doesn't have these issues with landlords who are predatory, who are preying on them, so that they have an equitable and fair place that they can live.
While I got you here, what about waste transfer stations? Would you support the idea that all 5 boroughs should be equally distributed and not favoring any one of the other 4?
Of course, and we have a history in Harlem of having an overabundance of methadone plants, garbage recycling plants, transitional housing, all of these things that they want to put up here. And now, you know, it's a situation where we've got an overabundance of it because there wasn't an effort to combat these things earlier on. So you've got to deal with what you have now and make sure that we make it a more equitable environment for everyone.
Rock, you spoke about the transfer stations. You know, right now, the Speaker of the City Council and myself, and I believe I saw Jessica Lappin come into the building. We have been fighting. We have been fighting. Gail Brewer's here, there's others. Gail is here. But what I'm bringing out is that the transfer station that's proposed at 92nd Street, on the east side, that community is saying no. And we're fighting hard to put it there so that it is not located in Harlem once more, where asthma is prolific, where heart trouble is prolific, and we're right now fighting to put that transfer station right there on the east side, on 92nd Street, so that it is fair. And that community is pushing back and has taken us to court about it, but we're still standing strong, and we're in court to say that that will be on that east side, on 92nd Street, in that community, and not in Harlem once more.
Listen.
Let's get real here. Like, we create waste here too. So it's a situation where we need to come up with, like you said, an equitable plan so that everybody's waste has somewhere to go.
That's why
and it's not just that
Riverside.
But we shouldn't stop the conversation. We're not here, over there, and whatever. We got to come up with a plan.
That's the plan, is to be fair and equitable.
Stand in a unified front and make sure that there's an equitable and fair plan of action for where.
That's exactly what the City Council is working on. That's why we're putting it on the east side this time, and not put another one here in Harlem, or not in the Bronx, where they already have it, and here where we already have it.
We started at 7:10, and I know we have another round of candidates coming up after this. So given that we got about 10 more minutes, 1 hour there, 1 hour, we got about 10 more minutes for this. What I'll do is I'll give one last question. I'll give each one of you 2 minutes for a closing statement. I'll just ask one thing. None of the personal invective, none of the attacks and whatnot. Can you just say exactly what you're expecting in your next term if you're elected, and what you do if you are elected, okay? But before you take that question, before you get to that, let me ask you a question about quality groceries in this neighborhood. And since a lot of us now in this health kit, and we're trying to get the best, freshest, and whatnot, what kind of plans or ideas you have for improving the kind of food service delivery as it relates to quality and freshness in the things that people cook and whatnot in this particular district? Yeah, you don't want to do it. Let him start and then you can go on.
Sure. You know, the short answer to that is we need more access to quality foods, fresh grown produce, locally produced produce, and access to that type of environment where it's easy to get to, and there needs to be legislation to make sure that bodegas actually have more quality produce in them. My bigger issue, which I would like to add to this whole conversation, is since we cut back on civics classes so much, we could provide, you know, produce to people, and a lot of people don't even know how to prepare it and store it. We have a lot of people in this community who don't have the proper cookware and things necessary to prepare the food. So we really have to put some emphasis in making sure that not only people have access to the quality food products, that they have the access to the knowledge of how to prepare that food and how to make healthy meals for their families. this is more than just, this is a health initiative that's comprehensive. It's more than just the access of the food. You can stop the conversation there, but it's got to be a broader conversation about what we need.
Ms. Dickens?
Well, first of all, I think most of us have pots and pans.
And there are some people who aren't as fortunate as you.
Most of us have pots and pans. However, I've been blessed to be able to fund healthy initiative at Harlem Hospital. We bring green markets on Friday, every Friday on Malcolm X Boulevard in front of the hospital at the Mural Pavilion, where I was blessed to be and helped to bring $350 million for it to be built. I also have the healthy market at the state office building, of which I, Senator Perkins, and Assemblymember Wright have fought to keep it there for healthy initiatives. I have an obesity initiative that I fund at Harlem Hospital. I also have a healthy initiative to help educate people on the various foods that are available to us that can be prepared in a healthier manner.
Thank you. And that, my friend, leads us to the closing part where each one of you had 2 minutes to go. Any one of you care to go first? Or I don't want to go. We want to go last, whatever. Ladies first, Ms. Dickens.
I'm going to let my.
You're going to let your friend go first. Sure. Mr. Morgan, she deferred to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a critical time in this community. We've had too long where we've had representation that wasn't connected to us, that didn't represent us well, that didn't really pick up the pieces of this community, combine them together in something strong. Look around this room. All of you are invested in this community, and you deserve to have leadership at the city council, at the state level, and at the federal government level that represents you with a constructive plan of action of what to do. I was born in Chicago, in an area very much like Harlem. I've lived here for 13 years. I've had the great fortune of working in government for one of Ms. Dickens' colleagues, Congressman Charles Rankin. I met my wife here, who's a New Yorker. We're raising our 2 kids here, and they go to public school in this district. I'm most importantly a citizen of Harlem and have fallen in love with the community that I believe has so much potential. But at this critical juncture, when we have a new mayor, wherever that may be, coming in, we need a strong city council and a strong city council representative that has skills to tackle some of these issues around job creation, around public schools, and around quality of life issues in this community that are going to be impactful for us, not just today, but 10 years, 20 years from now. I do not want to raise my children in a community where 20 years from now, they can't afford to stay here. And we need to make sure that we carve out economic opportunities for everyone here. The people that feel like they're being left behind that invested their whole lives. And we need to have a constructive plan of action based on real quantitative opportunities and fulfilling those needs for the people that's going to be substantive. So I'm asking all of you to consider that on September 10th and consider putting a new person in that city council seat that's going to be able to hit the ground running and put a constructive plan together for how we can address these issues and move all of our people together in this community.
Thank you, Mr. Dickens.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me in the church? I was born and raised in Harlem. I've never lived anywhere else. I was the constituents right here in this community. And I've been blessed with your support to represent you. I'm grateful for your support. Have I been everything to every individual? No, I have not. But I have been committed in my love and support for this community. I have fought hard for this community. Everyone may not agree with everything I did. And if I tell you that that's the way it's going to be, I would be lying to you. And anybody that's running for office tells you they can do that, they're lying to you. I cannot be everything to every individual. But I am committed to doing the best I can. I have brought, last year I brought $60 million in resources to this community with the help of my colleagues. It went also to transitional housing. It also went to transportation. It went to health initiatives. I will continue that fight. I love this community. I was born and raised here. I support my cultural here. I support the Schaumburg here. I support dance near Harlem. My parks, I've got 7 historic parks. I support each and every one of them. I go to my NYCHAs, which is provides affordable housing. I go to my NYCHAs and I fund them every year. I also walk the streets. I go to the block associations and I stand tall. I stand tall beside my community, all of my community. We've got a new community. This is a community in transition. But I stand in support of this entire community. We've got to work this together. We've got to be committed together. That's why many people were very adverse against the 125th Street rezoning. But it actually was not accepting the mayor's proposal, but instead fighting that it would be what the community wanted. And now the community understands it and wants to know why do not rezone all of Harlem. Why? Because the current zoning of Harlem says that they can build anything they want to any height. I said no, that's going to burn. I also stood tall to see to it that in my community, when they move out for building of affordable housing, that you can move back into that development. So I apologize, Rob, to you.